Hello, friends. Very happy morning. Today in this class, and we will be discussing about uh, uh, what is the concept of tribal society and how they are very important in trying to understand the social anthropology. Why tribal societies play a crucial role in understanding the discipline of social anthropology, or in other words, why social anthropology is so concerned about tribal societies. So we'll try to understand this aspect clearly. Um, uh, as you know that tribal societies, they are the people who constitute a significant segment of India's population, right? And it has the largest population in the world, next to Africa. And in fact, African continent, they have a huge number of tribal population. But after African continent, and it is the India, um and who tribal people, they inhabit the most after African continent. So India, we have, according to 2011 census, and we have 8.6% of the total population, and in fact that's a huge population, and it's more than identified tribes. It's more than 750 tribes are living in India, different tribes, and who speak of more than 150 languages. And of course there are again 225 to 250 subsidiary languages are also there. So it's in a way trying in a way that all these tribal communities, though they share a similar few patterns, cultural patterns, yet each tribal community maintains a distinct character and unique way of life, and who would differentiate themselves from not only from non-tribal segment of population, but also they differentiate from other tribal communities as well. So each community, they identify themselves differently. It's because that they follow certain cultural practices, and they speak a different language, and they follow different social systems and kinship patterns and so on. So all these tribal communities in India, they belong to various racial, linguistic, cultural, and ethnic categories, right? So every tribal community has its own unique culture, tradition, values, mores, and folkways, and so on and so forth. So in India, the diversity of the tribes is very rich in nature, from the length and breadth of its region. So the diversity is so significant that we can feature out and figure out in Indian context. So knowing the social system is interesting because every society or group has a system without which no unit can operate, because we as a social individuals, we require the social systems. Without social system, without social rules and regulations, a human society is merely not possible. So in a way that even the tribal society also has their own social group, social system. So that each social system has subsystems, such as educational, and such as economic, religious, and political, and so on. So in the same way that the tribal system speaks about the its traditional pattern of living, as well as its unique features like a group or tribe, sub tribe, clan, lineage, family, and so on. So therefore, what I'm trying to indicate here is that, and it is necessary to understand the various the tribal social systems, particularly in relation to Indian context, and its related concepts of tribal systems, such as the tribe, the habitat, characteristics, and so on and so forth. So this the tribal the areas, particularly in Indian context, are found in a diversified backgrounds. For instance, one can find tribal communities, they live in deeper parts of forest and hilly areas, and we find tribal communities even in the plain areas also, in a way that they inhabit almost all parts of Indian context. So they're referred to a different variety of names, for instance, and we call them as the original inhabitants of Indian, the people of the hills and forest and so on. So we have a different forest, and who live in the forest, and who live in the plain areas, and who live in the semi-plain areas, and who live in urban societies, also rural societies. So it's like the tribal societies, they live in different regions due to their historical and social backgrounds. So, let us try to understand what is the meaning of tribe. So, and how we can understand the meaning of tribe. So, what exactly are the criteria for considering a tribe, and what are the indices of a tribal life and the community? Uh, Let us try to understand these concepts, my dear friends. Um, there are very various definitions one can find out when it comes to the definitions of tribe and the concept of tribe, and particularly in Indian context. For instance, and Indian society is separated into tribal, rural, and urban groups, according to its geographic location and subcultural traits. And uh, and it is also that an essential part of Indian society are the tribal communities, and these are tribes, and in practically every region of the planet. And in fact, as I told you that Africa is home to the world's biggest tribal population, with India is coming to the next. So in a way that whenever we talk about Indian society, suppose if you don't speak about tribal communities, we are not done in complete sense. So in a way that since the tribes occupy a major place in the tribal society, particularly in Indian context. Um, uh, uh, you know the when we talk about Indian society, and it is very essential to mention and discuss and understand about tribal societies, my dear friends. So these are tribes, in practically particularly the tribal people, they have a different cultures, and the dialects, faiths, and strong ethnic identities. They live in relative seclusion in highland woods or well defined locations. It is well known that tribes are they are the forest land dwellers, and who arrived on the Indian peninsula first. The tribal people are sometimes referred to as Adivasis. So these are they are referred to as Adivasis, which means that they are the original occupants in India. So they are regarded as socio-culturally backward in the modern world, and that though we say that have a strong objection to this point, they're not necessarily to be seen as backward, and they have a different unique ways of practicing the cultural life and socio-economic and political life. So in a way that they are different and distinct, but when it comes to the modern life, and in fact we find very lacking features of the modern setup, but yet they maintain a symbiotic relation with the forest and the ecology. So so tribes are in a way that since the diversity exists among the tribal groups, so tribes are very difficult to define and conceptualize, since they live in diverse socio-economic environments and are constantly assimilating and acculturating with the larger social structure. And this is also due to the impact of the modernization and industrialization and globalization, that many tribes are now assimilating to the mainstream Indian tradition, and their acculturation is also taking place along with this modernity project. So in a way that once they are assimilated, and the one of the drawbacks of this assimilation process is that they lose their cultural identity. So this is also another biggest challenge and problem that is existing in Indian context. So my dear friends, and when we talk about the etymology of the term tribe, so the tribe means that it is a Latin word which means tribals. It is meaning of the which indicates that a community of people and who claim common ancestry. So that is the meaning of a tribe, generally understanding. But in general, tribe is a socially cohesive unit associated with the territory, the members of which regard themselves as politically autonomous, is referred to as a tribe. So the term tribe was used to describe a certain stage in the socio-political development of a group of people, and speaking a particular language inside a designated region, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of definitions that are available in sociology literature, and also in anthropological literature particularly. But we refer them as Adivasis in Indian context. So going by this understanding, what is a tribe? Right, a tribe is a collection of families bearing a common name, right, speaking a standard dialect, right, occupying or professing to occupy a familiar territory, and is not usually endogamous, and though initially it might have been so. So this is the general understanding according to the definition given by the Imperial Gazetteer of India, right. For instance, if you see the Oxford Dictionary, so Oxford Dictionary, it mentions that a tribe is a group of people in a primitive or barbarous stage of development, acknowledging the authority of a chief and usually regarding themselves as having a common ancestry. Right. So, for instance, you have another scholar and who defines this, and according to Rolf Linton, so he defines a tribe as a tribe is a group of bands occupying a contiguous territory or territories and feeling unity deriving from numerous similarities in culture, frequent contacts, and a certain community of interest. So and similarly, Lucy Mayer, and this scholar defines a tribe is an independent political division of a population with a common culture. So yeah, for instance, when it comes to our Indian scholar, very famous one, the S.C. Dubey, right, he says that a tribe is a group of people sharing social values, a common dialect, territory and culture, under usually under a head, right. So, and Sachidananda is also another very famous scholar, and he defines that a tribal society as a system of small producers with simple technology, right. They consume what they produce. So it's like similarly, and you have another scholar and who defines a hunting word. He says that a tribe is a group united by a common name, in which the members take pride in a common language, by a common territory, and a feeling that all who do not share this name are outsiders, and so on. So the famous one in Indian context, the sociologist and also social anthropologist Majumdar, D.N. Majumdar, and he gives a very vast and very broad definition in understanding the concept of tribe. So according to him, a tribe is a social group with territorial affiliation, endogamous, with no specialization of functions, ruled by tribal offices, hereditary, or otherwise united in language or dialect, recognizing social distance with other tribes or caste without any social obliquity attaching to it. Then he says that they are the tribes are the most conscious of homogeneity of ethnic and territorial integration. Friends, let us try to understand this, the concept of tribe through these definitions. According to all the definitions, and when we club together, so what is the common, the thread that goes through all these tradition definitions of tribe is that a tribe is a tribe who speak about a language, particular language, and who have a common ancestry, and who share a particular boundary, right? Who share a particular boundary, and who practice a simple economy, and who produce their agricultural produce for their own consumption and not for the sake of market. They don't sell their product to the market, which means that their economy is guided by simple technology, and the technology is used for their own consumption. And these tribes are also, they maintain ties among themselves. They practice endogamy, that is very important. They marry according to them, not according to their own gotras. They marry among themselves in a sense that they marry only between the tribes, not with the uh, outsiders, non-tribes. So this is a general understanding of a tribe. They have a different economy, simple economy. They have a political, authority structure. They have their own, as you see that caste panchayats that exist in the rural areas. Tribes are also have their own traditional authority structures. If there is any crime and if there is any mistake done by community members, it is the elders of the community and who take that charge in issuing their judgments and punishments. They don't go to the courts or police departments and so on, right? So they have their own set of function, the community who always loves to uh, follow their continue and follow their autonomy, and who live in symbiotic relation with the forest and ecology, right? And they maintain a very symbiotic relation, very close organic relation with the forest, and who generally they don't destroy nature. They respect nature, because they whatever the technology they follow for their economic produce or consumption produce is very simple. They don't exploit the nature. They only take the product for their own consumption. That's it, right? So that is the meaning of the tribe. One thing is the simple economy, and the next one is they have their own political authority. They speak their different language. They follow a particular mode of marriage system and the kinship system. They have a common ancestry. They have a common territory, right? All these characteristics define the concept of tribe, define the concept of tribe, isn't it? So that is the meaning of tribe in when we understand the concept of tribal society and community in Indian context. So having understanding about this, the definitions of tribe, let us try to understand the characteristics of tribe. So what are the major characteristics? The major characteristics are nothing but what we discussed in the definitions of tribe, because all these characteristics define the future of tribal societies, and we discussed just now. So let us try to understand a little more briefly about the characteristics of tribe. Generally, what they have, generally what they have, what they possess, the characteristics of tribe. Let us try to understand, my dear friends. Uh, as I told you that the tribal societies, in tribal societies, the social networking is based on kinship relation. Is based on kinship relation, right? They are based on kinship relation, because each thing is based on their kin. They have different kinship relations, which are not present in the non-tribals, and they have a different peculiar distinct the social relations. Therefore, that social relations are exist based on the kinship pattern. Kinship pattern. As I told you that they live in a particular territory, particular geography. Generally, they don't move out of that geography or territory, because they live in that territory. They don't live. They don't go. They don't migrate. Unlike us, and unlike non-tribals, they keep migrating from one point of location to another. Why? Because of their jobs, for instance, and because of their living standards, educational the challenges, issues, needs, and so on. But whereas when it comes to the tribal societies, they don't migrate, because it is only through that particular territory they live and share a common bondage between the members of the community. And generations to generation, right, they live in that particular geography. And another characteristic, as I told you, is that they have a specific cultural practices. For instance, each tribal communities, they have a different cultural practices. They have different cultural festivals. For instance, in Telangana, it is very famous in the world also, the Samaka Saraka Jatara. And it though it is practiced by Koya tribe from Telangana region. Now it has been commercialized and popularized in a wider domain. Even non-tribes and other tribes are also participating in that gathering every time. So, for instance, Lambada have a different festivals, right? Chenchus have a different festivals. So they have different cultural practices, right? So each tribal group community have their own cultural practices, right? And they have a different language or dialect. For instance, Lambada tribe has their own language, Koya has their own language, Toda Toti is also Pradhan, Toti Pradhan, Gonds. They have a different language patterns. And also generally they have a egalitarian nature. They follow certain, though they have some hierarchy within the community, yet they believe in egalitarian in nature, right? They also and practice, the most important is the endogamous group. They follow marriage among themselves. They don't give their daughters or sons to other communities or other gotras within the tribe, same tribe. So they follow certain uh, rules and regulations. And among the occupations they practice, they have a lack of occupational specialization. The occupational specialization here indicates is that whereas when it comes to the modern economy, right, and you find a very vast kind of roles, starting from the capitalist, the owner of the company, to the manager, sub manager, workers, supervisors, and so on and so forth. Suppose if you visualize the industrial setup, right, so the hierarchy exists at each level. One works below the other or above the other for the maintenance of all industry setup, right? So in a in a sense that the tribal societies, they lack such specialization rules. It is also because is that they follow simple technology in their occupations. Here, even the husband accompanies the wife, and wife accompanies the husband in collection of the agricultural or forest products. Even children also accompany. So in a way that there is a certain kind of lack of the occupational specialization in tribal societies. And they have a different the cultural understanding, you know so they practice a different economy setup. So what I'm trying to indicate here is that based upon the all this, the tribal characteristics or the definitions, one can think that these are the general way of understanding of tribal communities in Indian context. Now you may ask a question, is that are they living with these characteristics in the modern era? The answer partially yes, partially not. It is because that particularly after independence, the government of India launched many schemes and development measures for uplifting of the tribal communities. And there is a lot of assimilation is also taking place, and during that process, that India is also on the path of industrial revolution or industrialization. And as part of industrialization, there's a lot of non-entry of non-tribals and the state to the tribal habitats, because whatever as part in the name of industrialization, there is also the occupation of the forest belt, in a way that during this process there is a lot of conflict that is existing between the tribal communities and the state, because tribal communities are not in the position to leave their tribal habitats. It's because that for generations to generations they have been living in that particular forest belt. And for Indian government on the one hand imposing a lot of forest restrictions, and tribals are facing a lot of problems in trying to access to forest produce. So there is a lot of the tribal conflict that is taking place in India, and who demand for their rights over forest. And along with that, there is also the impact of modernity on their life. Now one can see that there are a lot of the infusion of mobile network into the tribal areas. Now most of the tribals are possessing mobiles, in a way that now they are connected to the modern world and they are influenced by the modern world. modern technology, positively and negatively, and in a way that few tribes are happy with that process, but majority of the tribes in the sense the members within the tribe are opposing this modernity effect, because they feel that with the effect of modernity and industrialization, they feel that they will lose their cultural identity, they will lose their distinct ways of communitarian living that have been in practice over the years. So all these issues were there, when it comes to the tribal societies in context Indian context. So what in a way that the kind of a civilization project that has been enacted by the Indian government for the upliftment of tribes, though it has a very good motive behind it, but yet when it comes to the implementation practice, there is a lot of the conflict between the tribes and the Indian state. It's because that the tribes are now feeling threat that they would lose their cultural identities once they mix with the non-tribal entities. So this is a general thing that is happening. Now most of the tribes are also changing with the impact of education, with the impact of employment, with the impact of you know uh, uh, the globalization and modernity. Now many tribes are now migrating from their geographies to search for educational needs, and after completing their education they are also moving away from their the rural geography and the territories in search of economic opportunities, employment opportunities to cities, urban cities. So in a way that there is a lot of the mixing that is happening between the tribes and non-tribes. So it is a positive sign that they are moving from their lands and mixing with the non-tribes, and trying to also reaping the benefits of modernity. It is also a good sign. Nobody is denying these facts. But but there is also another threat, is that what happens if the entire cultural identity of tribes lose. There is also a recent studies that is um showing is that most of the tribal languages are now vanishing, because the present day generation you know are not maintaining ties with their cultural identities, and in a way that the tribal languages are also facing a huge threat, that most of the tribal languages are now in a vanishing stage. So this is the negative effect of the process modernity and industrialization process. uh, after understanding this, friends, let us also trying to understand, you know let us try to understand the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, because when we talk, as I told you, is that tribe when we talk about tribe, they are not a homogeneous entity. They consist of a diversified way, communities, though we call all these communities are tribes, no doubt, but they have a different nature of tribe. Few tribes are so well advanced, few tribes are in the process of taking that advance, and few tribes are still backward, who maintain their ties with the forest. And there are certain tribes, once they come out of their tribal, the forest life, they fail to adjust with the modern setup, right? So those tribes are called as, you know particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Those are called PVTGs in Indian context. And these tribal communities are facing certain problems, and in fact they are in trouble. They are in severe trouble. The entire population of PVTG is suffering and is on the verge of extinction, my dear friends. For instance, if you take the example of Chenchus from Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, they live in Nalamala forest, deeper parts of Nalamala forest. Those are hunting and food gathering. They are in hunting and food gathering stage, and those are called particularly vulnerable. Why we are saying vulnerable? Particularly vulnerable means what? Because they are in the stage of extinction. When we talk about Indian population, we generally think that Indian population is increasing day by day. There is no doubt. At some point or the other, we'll beat China, and will be the number one position in the world, in the Earth planet, right? Already we crossed 155 crores or 160 crores nearing to, and still will be very soon cross 170 also. So Indian population is rising. There is no doubt. But but when it comes to the particular vulnerable tribal groups such as Chenchus, their population is decreasing day by day. Their population is decreasing day by day. It is a worrisome, no? Why it is happening? Why they are unable to adjust with the modern economy? Why they are unable to adjust with the civilized world? We have to think about it. We have to think about it. Therefore, those tribal communities are in the verge of extinction. It is a very big challenge for policymakers, Indian rulers, and also the academicians and researchers to find out the ways, the better ways to safeguard their interest and communitarian living. Therefore, we are calling them as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. They are vulnerable, right? So, based on the vulnerability, the criteria of identifying these groups, according to the government of India in 1970s or so, the Ministry of Home Affairs, they issued certain features, guidelines, or characteristics in trying to understand and identify the particularly vulnerable tribal group in India. And who are these? The government gave certain guidelines in identifying such tribal groups, communities in India. And what are them? It basically issued certain four basic, the features. The first among them is the pre-agricultural level of technology and economy. They are pre-agricultural, not modern. I'm talking about not modern, not even agriculture. They're pre-agriculture means what? It means they derive their subsistence, food, from hunting and gathering techniques. If they are hungry, they go to the forest, they hunt a particular animal, they take food from it, and they also they gather their food from the forest belt. They gather roots, they gather fruits, they gather leaves, and so on from the forest belt. Which means what? They don't show interest in cultivation. They don't show interest in engaging themselves in agriculture. They engage themselves, they would like to see themselves in hunting and food gathering stage only. And this hunting and food gathering thing, my dear friends, you should understand is that this practice actually existed some thousands of years back. As human society progressed from one stage to another, the human society, they left hunting gathering practices and they followed and invented, discovered agricultural practices. And after practicing those agricultural practices for some ages or some hundreds of years, they started shifting their economy to industries, industrialization, modernity, modern era, and so on and so forth. But whereas this human society, that is hunt food and have hunting and food gathering tribes, they are still maintaining that continuity of the past. That past existed some thousands and thousands of years back. Which means what? They are carrying that cultural identity from one generation to another generation by believing, practicing that food, hunting and food gathering practices, my dear friends. Therefore, those tribal groups, the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, they follow pre-agricultural level of technology and economy. And another characteristic that is issued by the Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, is that declining population. Declining population. As I told you, is that taking the example of chinchus, their population is declining day by day. Why? Why their population is declining? Is it because they have a contact with the modern world, or is it because the modern world is in contact with them? What is happening? What is happening? In fact, these tribal communities, they have their own indigenous medicinal practices. Suppose if there is any sickness or illness for their health, they don't go to the primary health centers or district hospitals. They hardly believe, they have different opinions about allopathic medicine or any other medicine. It's simple because they follow their own indigenous medicinal practices from medicinal plants and belief systems. So there is a problem that is existing. It is either because the modern medicine is unable to cure them, or is it because They are unable to find certain medicinal plants that were existed in the past to cure certain elements. And there is also the lot of food changing habits are also happening. Or with all these practices, there is a change in their living patterns. Therefore, there is a decline in their population, isn't it? And another important characteristic, or rather guidelines, issued by Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, to identify particularly one tribal, particularly one vulnerable tribal groups, is that low rate of literacy or no literacy compared to other tribes. Generally, this group, with these vulnerable tribal groups, have very low level of literacy rates, or in other words, no literacy at all. Literacy here, it indicates that the person who knows the mainstream education is literate according to Indian government definition or the mainstream definition, right? But it doesn't mean that they are uneducated. You know, this for example, Chenjus, they may not they send their children to regular schools. It doesn't mean that they are uneducated. We are only saying illiterates because they are not following the modern ways of education system. For that reason only we are labeling them as illiterates. Illiterate is a person who doesn't know how to read, type, write, right? The English and vocabulary or Telugu vocabulary. But that is called the literacy and illiteracy according to Indian definition. It doesn't mean that they are uneducated. They are also educated. Educated means what? Those who understand their own social environment in a better way, called education. They have their own education. There is no doubt about it. In a way that they are also educated. But those who do not follow Indian education, those who do not send their children to the Anganwadis or the primary schools, higher secondary schools, higher education, they are called those are called illiterates according to the Indian government definitions. And another important characteristic is that they have a subsistence level of economy. As I told you, they have a subsistence level of economy. What is subsistence? Subsistence means in primitive, vulnerable, tribal groups, generally there is a absence of market system. If there is a market system, what you do, you take the product with you to sell that product in the market. But whereas when it comes to this vulnerable tribal communities, they collect the agricultural produce, they hunt an animal, for example, for their own consumption. They don't market those products for money or any other thing, because for them the money is not required at all, because everything is available in the forest, and they derive their food and the living needs from the nature, right? So their economy is subsistence level of economy, because that economy is only for their own consumption. It is not marketed in the with the outside world, with the outside world, isn't it? So these are the major characteristics of primitive agricultural, primitive vulnerable tribal groups. I repeat them again. One thing is that those communities, they have a pre-agricultural level of economy and technology, and those population are in the declining stage, and those communities have a very low rate of literacy, and they follow, or rather practice and believe in subsistence level of economy, because whatever they collect from the hunting or food gathering practices, it is for their own consumption. It is called subsistence level of economy. So my dear friends, all these characteristics define the nature of primitive tribal groups on the one hand, and we also discussed the general characteristics of tribal groups. In the next class, we will try to understand the tribal challenges, issues, and problems in Indian context due to the impact of globalization, modernity, and industrialization on their living practices. And we will understand all these issues in the next class. So, in this class, we discussed about what is the meaning of tribe. We also discussed the various definitions associated in understanding the concept of tribe, and we also discussed that tribal communities are so diversified in nature, and among that, to understand the diversity of the tribal communities in the Indian context, we specially discussed the primitive tribal group or vulnerable tribal groups in India, and we also discussed the what are the features that are associated with the primitive vulnerable tribal groups. So in the next class, we will be discussing more about the issues and challenges that exist with the tribal communities in Indian context, and why they are important in social anthropology discourse. We will be discussing in the next class. Thank you, friends, for joining us today. Thank you so much.